You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Good evening. My name is Peter Basserman, Chair of the Branford Inland Wetlands Commission. We are meeting tonight, March 10th, 2022 at 7 o'clock. This is a regular meeting of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency. The minute from previous minutes from previous meetings are on the town website, as well as the agenda for this evening's meeting. We are meeting tonight under Public Act 21-2, which is a virtual meeting using the Zoom platform. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone so that we have good fidelity. To the extent that you need to speak and you're a member of the public, please wait until the commission has completed their discussion on the item, and then you may speak. You can raise your hand and we'll hopefully identify the need for you to speak. Let's see, tonight we have one item on the agenda that might be a little fluid based on the applicant's availability, and we'll deal with that. The applicant may join us late, and if so, I think we'll suspend what we're discussing at the moment and deal with that item. Let's do a roll call. First up, Peter Basserman here. Suzanne Boda.
Commissioner Boda here.
Melissa Papatonis.
Melissa Papatonis here.
Melissa Finaro.
Melissa Finaro here.
Mark Steinberg.
Mark Steinberg here.
Clarice Begerman.
Commissioner Begemon here.
And staff. Richard Walsh.
Reynolds here.
Staff, Jamie Frederick.
Here.
And Abby York.
Here.
Great. First up, minutes for approval, February 10th, 2022. We have regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Commissioner Greenwald, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the regular meeting of February 10th.
Commissioner Papatonis, second.
Thank you. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any abstentions?
Aye.
Did we have an abstention? No?
Commissioner Steinberg did, yes.
No, I said aye, but I was late.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
No abstentions.
No abstention.
Okay, next up, February 17th, a special meeting minute.
This is Commissioner Steinberg. I make a motion we accept the special meeting of February 17th minutes.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Boda, I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Commissioner Greenwald, abstain.
What was that, Richard?
Commissioner Greenwald, abstain.
Okay. We have one application for receipt this evening in the Wetland 220201, 36 Greenfield Avenue, the construction of an attached garage. Jamie, you want to give us why you think this could be agent approval?
Sure. Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I plan on approving this administratively. The activity is in a relatively flat area that's already lawn. It's about 65 feet away from the wetland, and closest erosion control is about 55 feet away. I emailed the applicant to just clarify a couple of details, as his application did not come with the project narrative. And also I wanted to give time for Regional Water Authority to provide comments should they so choose to do so. If you would like, I can pull up the site plan. Otherwise.
You want to post that site plan?
Okay. So this is the existing house. They're looking to put the garage on the side in line with the back portion of the house. The wetland line is back here. It's mostly off of the subject property on state property. The limits of existing lawn are pretty much identified by this tree line. I did drive by the site and there's one landscape shrub that would have to get removed for the garage. It's my understanding that the grading is to remain the same, and they do have an erosion control right here, with this being a high spot over here, which is why the erosion controls don't extend further behind the house. So I was just looking to get it confirmed in writing that there's no grading changes. Otherwise, I would want to see that erosion control plan maybe modified slightly to accommodate those minor grade changes.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. So they're adding a garage there. That's what that space represents.
Yes, I believe 24 by 24 proposed garage.
Are they doing a dry well or anything for the roof?
My understanding is that they're looking to have it sheet flow from the garage. In the past, I don't think we've always required on-site management for something like a garage addition. However, if that's something the commission's interested in, I can follow up with the applicant.
I think this is Commissioner Boda. I think, you know, as you go through the agent approval process, I would just say to consider it and if it's appropriate for the site, and how much water the backyard will take. I mean, we don't have a sense of if it's super dry all the time or, you know, where a water table is or anything. So I would just put it in for consideration.
Okay. Yeah, I was at one of my other outstanding questions was confirming whether or not they're proposing any drainage, and for clarification on that. So I will follow up on that.
Does anyone not feel that this is appropriate for agent approval? Okay. Enforcement. Notice of violation for 113 Flax Mill Road. Placement of wood chips within an upland review area resulting from removal of storm damaged trees. Jamie, have you had conversations with the homeowner?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I did meet with the homeowner out on site on February 23rd, which was after, I know we've had some cold and warm weather, so it was after it had thawed out for a while. So one of the things I was looking at was whether the wood chips had transported at all. They were very loose and not frozen at all, and we had rain a couple days previously, and they had not moved at all. So my recommendation would be that I follow up with the homeowner to make sure that the wood chips are thinned out as we previously discussed. And then maybe the commission wants to consider sending a follow-up letter to kind of, remind the homeowner to ask if they need permission for anything prior to starting work, so that hopefully we don't end up in another situation with a violation. I'm pretty sure the homeowner is very much aware of the fact he needs to ask permission before he does activities. He's mentioned a couple of possible future projects, and I've touched base with him on what that process might look like. So, but it never hurts to follow up with a letter. Any thoughts?
Was there a kind of a line in the sand date in terms of when we expect the activity to be completed?
So I didn't expect him to necessarily follow up on the wood chips when I went out on February 23rd, because we got another snowstorm right after that. And it seemed like it would be appropriate to bring it to the commission to make sure that the commission agreed with the course of action proposed by staff. But yeah, I would expect we should put a time frame, and probably by the end of the month.
So at this point, the NOV remains in effect.
So a notice of violation is a little bit different than like a cease and correct order, in the fact that it's basically a correspondence. But yes, I would say that it's not resolved until the wood chip activity has occurred. And if the commission wants me to report back at the April meeting, then I'll certainly do that.
Okay, thank you.
Does the commission also want me to send a letter, or just report back on the activity being completed?
What's your sense of the level of cooperation?
Amy Frederick and the Millennium. I think the homeowner is aware now that he's better to ask for permission than beg for forgiveness. And I've kind of mentioned, specific types of projects might require wetland delineation, other things probably wouldn't. One project he was interested in doing was placing a shed within existing lawn area. I said he would need an inland wetland permit for that, but that I would not require wetland delineation based on where he wanted to put it. He also mentioned that he wants to plant a couple of trees along the rear of his property, the rear of the lawn area. I mentioned that he was welcome to do that as long as he was minimizing the ground disturbance and planting, and that he was ideally planting natives and not planting invasives. And that he should maybe just let me know what he's planting, so that way it's not an issue.
I don't know, given the items that you touched on with the homeowner, it might be a good practice for us just to send a letter to make sure that there's no misunderstanding of what we're asking for and what we're no longer asking for.
Okay.
Commissioner, have any other questions or comments for staff on this one?
This is Commissioner Boda. I would just agree. I think it's good to keep the correspondence in writing, just to make sure that we're all have a common understanding. And for next month, and who knows, it's very possible we'll get a lot of rain between now and the next month. So I think that based on the weather, it could be next month, or it could be May. It feels like it's starting to aim toward a pretty wet spring.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Papantonis, and because it was the second violation, I think a letter is in order, even if he understands.
Okay.
It's Commissioner Finaro. I was just wondering about whether to provide a little more time for the wood chips to be spread out until, because of the weather and everything. Should be pushed out to the end of April.
Inland wetland agent. I think he will be able to do it before the April meeting. So maybe, so the April meeting is, I believe, April 12th. No, April 14th. So I could give him until like April 12th and still be able to report back to the commission. And then that way the wood chips are pulled back from the roots while the trees are starting to kind of wake up and do their thing.
Commissioner Fenaro, I agree.
Okay. The next item is the one that the applicant may be joining us late on, so we're going to skip over 11 Pondview Terrace. Am I right, Jamie, that the homeowner is not on the call?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I do not appear to see them, and they appear to be speaking up. So yes, I believe it'd be right to table it for now.
Moving on, notice of violation 7 Featherbed and 391 East Main Street, the excavation of a water course. Again, Jamie, have you had conversation with the property owner here?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I have, these addresses may sound familiar. I believe back in December, the commission was looking at some clearing that happened on this, in this area. And it was presented that the area was unintentionally cleared by the tree company that was hired. That was not the area they were supposed to clear. At the time, one of the property owners hired a soil scientist, I believe it was Bob Russo, to go out and do a report to identify any wetland or watercourse areas. And that report indicated that there's a watercourse and indicated that no activity needed to really occur because there was a bunch of ivy on site that was keeping everything stabilized. So they were to remove some of the wood debris by hand and do some other minor activities like that, but no ground disturbance. Since then, a different neighbor was concerned with flooding relative to a pipe that goes behind some of the properties on Featherbed, and cleared the pipe or cleared the water course to try and promote flow, is my understanding, not realizing that a permit would be required, and I guess not realizing that it was private property. So I sent a letter to 7 Featherbed and 391 East Main Street. It seemed pretty clear from the activity that occurred that it was probably to promote some drainage. So I suggested to those property owners that they might want to reach out to their neighbors on Featherbed Lane to make sure they were aware that there's a water course there and that it's regulated by the Wetlands Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission. And maybe suggest that their neighbors attend this meeting if they had concerns regarding flooding and activity in the water course. So that way we can all get on the same page and everyone knows what's regulated. So I'm not entirely sure who we have for this item at the meeting tonight. I believe we do have one of the property owners, and I believe we have one of the neighboring property owners and maybe the person that ended up doing the activity. So I don't know how the commission wants to start. I can start with showing the picture. I can start with showing the letter. So the recent activities happened. The property owner of 391 East Main Street has hired another soil scientist, Matt Davison, who was out on the property earlier this week, I believe. And I did have a brief conversation with him yesterday. It's his opinion that there's no activity that needs to happen immediately to stabilize the activity. I would agree with that based on, met with the property owner before I ended up sending the letter to see the activity that had occurred. And I haven't noticed any erosion. The water running through the water course is running clear. There's no accumulated sediment at the pipe that discharges under Route 1. So we're expecting to get a plan from Matt Davison next week. He could not have it ready for tonight's meeting. So that will be for review either at the April 14th meeting, or if the commission wants to try and address this sooner rather than later, the commission could look to schedule a special meeting.
Commissioner Basserman, how was the water course cleared? Was it by hand?
This is Commissioner Boda. Before you do that detail, can you pull up a map and just clarify the address of the water course versus the address of who did the clearing? And then can we talk about what happened, what Chairman Basserman, because I'm just trying to hold it in my head where these things are happening in relation to each other. And if there wasn't a visual, that would be helpful.
All right.
Well, this is Gianna Graves, actually one of the neighbors on Featherbed. And I think the people here were not introduced who would have further clarification for this. I just wanted to introduce myself that I am at 11 Featherbed Lane as the homeowner.
Thank you. Hold on, there's an outstanding question to staff from a commissioner. Jamie, do you have a map?
1 minute. It would appear that I did not throw a map in the Dropbox, but I do have one in the address file, so I'm grabbing it now to add. So the activity is mostly on 391 East Main Street. It might also be on 7 Featherbed. It's not exactly clear where the pipe outlet is relative to the property line. So, can everyone see the GIS map?
Yes.
Okay, so this is East Main Street. This is Featherbed Lane. Casa Fiore is across the street here. So there is a pipe that runs behind, I think it starts on 13 Featherbed Lane. It runs through 11, 9, and 7, and it outlets somewhere either on 7 or 391 East Main Street. And then there's an open water course through 391 that then gets picked up by a culvert that goes under Route 1. So the clearing happened in this area here. And then I believe one of the property owners tried to, by hand, dig out the water course to remove some of the material, and then ended up borrowing equipment and dug it out by equipment. I believe that person is present, so if the commission wants firsthand account of that, then I'm sure they can provide that.
That happened after our initial meeting, the additional clearing?
Yes, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. This happened after the December meeting by a different party.
And the date, this is Commissioner Bassman, and the date of the NOV?
The date of the NOV is February 18th.
Any other commissioner have a question at this point?
So, okay, this is Commissioner Bowe. I just want to make sure I understand. So the NOV was issued to 11 Featherbed. The activity, the clearing took place on, 7 Featherbed. Sorry. The activity took place on the corner of 391 and 7. And is it 7 Featherbed that was in front of us in December?
So the NOV was issued to both 391 East Main Street and 7 Featherbed. 7 Featherbed was the property owner that had hired the tree company that did the clearing initially that the commission reviewed back in December. After activity occurred, I noticed when I was driving by that additional activity had occurred. I contacted both the owner of 391 East Main Street and 7 Featherbed from the previous contact information I had. And both owners were not aware that the activity had occurred or who had done it. That's when I suggested that they might want to reach out to some of their neighbors to try and figure out who did it, so that if there's a continued concern, it could get addressed. And if they wanted to know who did the activity, they could find out. So yeah, I also have some photos. So before, this area was still covered in ivy and it was stable. It hasn't, like I said, it hasn't seemed to have any active erosion issues, but it's certainly a little concerning in its state, in its current condition. So Matt Davison is working on a planting plan. I believe it's mostly going to consist of conservation seed mix and maybe some plugs to revegetate the area. And I think you mentioned using erosion control blanket, but that plan won't be ready until next week. But the water running was clear when I was out there, and it was clear when Matt Davison was out there earlier this week. And every time I drive by, I just take a look at it to make sure that nothing's looks like it's moving, and I haven't noticed it.
This is Commissioner Finaro. Is the goal of the plan to keep the water course flowing with the plantings? Or is it just...
I think there's two concerns here. There's one is stabilizing the area long-term, because I think in its current condition, long-term, it would potentially start to have some erosion issues. And then I think that too, there's potentially the neighbors' concerns. And I don't know if there's an easement on this property for the neighbors that are up slope to maintain it or not. So I don't know if there's any issues from the neighbors regarding this water course, or if their issues are regarding the pipe that's privately owned on their property. We do have some of the neighbors here, so I don't know if the commission wants to open it up for their comments.
Would seem prudent at this time.
I just have two more quick questions. This is Commissioner Boda. So that pipe, is the pipe privately owned by 391, or is it, at what point is it the, does it intersect with the town stormwater?
So I don't think any of it's town, yeah. So what we're looking at here in this picture is the state, that'd be the state drainage. I don't know if I have, yeah. And then, so this pipe outlet, I believe that's a privately owned pipe that is owned by probably 7 feather bed, 11 feather bed, and 13 feather bed. Oh, 7, 9, 11, and 13.
Okay, and then the last one, again, Commissioner Boda, who has hired Matt Davis?
The property owner at 391, where the activity has primarily occurred, has hired Matt Davison.
Thank you.
And I believe he sent letters to his neighbors, and I did get a call from the property owner at 13 Featherbed Lane. And he indicated that he did do the activity. He did not know that it was a regulated activity and that it required approval. And I have scheduled to meet him out on site tomorrow to review conditions and what his concerns are regarding flooding.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, is the easement issue, which we say at this point in time, we don't know the pipe and the easement, is that just a matter of, you know, investigation, research, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, it might be more complicated than that, but I would say that that's probably a private dispute, given that pipe and everything. So I think that that commission's concern really is what's happening there. And then I think that the homeowners, I just make make sure that whatever activity is going to happen with this water course is regulated and approved by the commission.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. As a practical matter, the property owners may know the status of the easement, and we have several of them on this meeting. So they may know who has the obligation to maintain and who owns the easement that goes across their property. So maybe we can ask them. They might not know, but they might. When they bought their property, their attorney probably advised them.
Commissioner Bassman, that's a good segue to opening up for the property owners to participate in the call. Who wants to go first? Somebody named Jim. State your name and address for the record.
Jim Henkel, 13 Featherbed Lane.
You got the floor, sir.
Thank you. I apologize for having us on this call right now. I had some significant damage from the tornado that hit a couple years ago in August. And with that being said, a lot of trees were uprooted and taken down in my yard. When that had happened, I had redone my backyard because of the amount of damage that was done. In doing so, when I had the work done, I had made sure that everything was sloped accordingly so that it would drain appropriately and function out that drain that is situated behind my house, running out through the end of Featherbed to Main Street. With that being said, we've had some significant rain, and when that damage occurred, the Public Works came out and cleaned up that area and put some of the wood chips down, to which I had raised concern that my lot was flooding, which it never had previously. And I spoke with Jen from Public Works, and she had said, no, here's the issue. And she pointed out that over time, the valley or gully or trench that was originally there had kind of filled in from the amount of silt, soil, what have you, that kind of built up. And what was ended up happening was that pipe that you see there at the time was 3/4 of the way blocked, and it was only allowing a minimal amount of water, which was the issue of the drainage. This was prior to the trees being removed. And she had said, what you need to do is you need to create a trench. You need to create a line for this water to come out, to which I tried to do multiple times by hand with a shovel and rake, to no avail. I spent hours down there trying to dig and move and sort, not trying to create any issues. Obviously, with all the trees there, it was very difficult to get any kind of equipment in there. So it was all based on me trying to create some easement, not only for me, but for my neighbors. We have 11, 9, and 13 have had our basements flooded. My yard is consistently wet because of the lack of drainage that's coming from there. And now it gets to the point where my backyard looks like a pond. And when that happens, my neighbors get concerned that there's going to be another flood. Since the trees have been down, the water hasn't flowed nearly as well as it did previously. After going through and speaking with Jen, she sent me some paperwork that basically says I have the right to maintain that pipe along with my neighbors, and then conduct what's necessary to keep that pipe flowing to alleviate any issues of flooding. When that meeting occurred with Jen, it was on site. We discussed some things. Wetlands was unfortunately never brought up to me, which is obviously why we're here right now. Had that been the case, I would have called Jamie and said, Jamie, we got a big problem. How do we figure this out without causing any disturbance? Unfortunately, I didn't know. And when I went in to clear out what was needed, I did what was necessary to keep my house and my neighbors' houses from flooding and from our properties kind of getting destroyed from the excess water. And here we are tonight, unfortunately, on this call.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Can you touch on, and were you responsible for the equipment to help clear the water course beyond the shovel and rake?
Yes, I was.
And what did we use?
Just a small little backhoe machine with a hook, a little bucket. I didn't go on the dirt. I kept the machine to the if you're going towards Main Street, I kept it to the right on the wood chips, and I just kind of reached the bucket over. It's about a 20 to 25 foot run that I cleared out. And Jamie can tell you this. It's on both sides of the bank, but at the same time, if you drive by at whatever hour, that water hasn't stopped flowing since that's been created. So it's a clear running path that the amount of water that's coming from the ground and from the drainage it's significant. So that drain is necessary. It was put in for a reason. Now I've spoke with Jamie today a decent amount. We're going to sit tomorrow at the property line and say what we can do to keep this flowing without creating any more issues or damage, all the while trying to help mitigate the issue that's occurred by what was done.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I just have a question. So is it your understanding that you have the easement? In other words, that the pipe starts at your property and that you have an easement over the other properties for the drainage to where it ultimately ends up?
Yeah, so I can forward this on to Jamie via email, but Jen from Public Works sent me these papers, and it basically says that I have rights running from my property to kind of upkeep the pipe, and then upkeep the exit area of it so that it flows freely.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Hinkle, this is Commissioner Boda. Did you say that the water is always running?
Yes, there's a consistent flow of water running down that that trench that's been opened up now.
So even beyond a day or two of a rain event, it continues to run?
Yes. So that's part of the issue I want to speak with Jamie about tomorrow when we meet is I'm going to see if I can get somebody in to potentially flush the pipe out. I don't know if there's something in there. I don't know if there's debris in there. I don't know if something was uprooted with the tree removal. I don't know. There may be a blockage, a kink, something maybe in that pipe. So part of what I want to talk with Jamie about is if I have that cleared, what's the process? How do I handle it? And then what's the next steps for us to fix the scenario that's been created?
This is Commissioner Papantonis again. I have another question. Do you know if any of the other burdened properties, in other words, any of the other properties that the pipe flows through also feed into that pipe, or is it just your property that's feeding into that pipe? In other words, water off of your property feeding into the pipe.
So I don't know what the actual pipe inside looks like. I don't know if it's a pipe that's got holes and it has it wrapped so that the water from the ground. I know that some of these houses were built with like a curtain drain around the house that drain into that. So that may be an aspect too of something where extra water is potentially being dumped into this pipe. I know I have one that goes into the pipe just because I could see the pipe in the cauldron outside of my house in my backyard. You could see the pipes that come in. There's no other opening, unfortunately, from my end all the way to the end of Featherbed to actually see in there. So you'd have to kind of dig into the ground to do that. But my guess is if I were betting, I would say that the curtain drain around the houses were all probably pitched into that area or built right in so that they dump into that drain so it goes out. It's not just water from my property. There's way too much water for it to just be from my property, in my opinion. Sorry, my dog's getting excited.
Thank you. Anybody else want to make a comment?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. There is another wetland area to the southwest of his property, of Jim's property. So that's one of the things I kind of wanted to look at as well, to see if there might be some influence from that in addition to the surface water. Another thought I had that I have not mentioned to Jim is the fact that I'm not sure how many trees were removed, but that can significantly change how much water is standing in an area. So you'd be surprised how much water trees take up. And so without those trees there, that water isn't getting taken up. So it's gonna kind of sit there. So it might be beneficial to replant with something and or have an engineer come out and help you design something if you're looking to kind of keep it open like a lawn.
This is Commissioner Baskerville. Is Matt Davison there tomorrow at tomorrow's meeting?
No. However, I think it would be beneficial for everyone that's concerned about the activity on 391 to discuss it with the property owner of 391 East Main Street. And I do see that the property owner of 391 East Main Street has his hand raised, and it might be beneficial to for everyone to kind of work together on a plan that addresses everyone's concerns. So I think it would be fair to let Mr. Smith talk next.
Yes, this is Dave Smith. I own the 391. The address is actually 411 East Main Street at that end of the street. When we moved and bought this property in 1980, that water was flowing on a pretty steady stream. And then over the past couple of years, it kind of tapered off. And then about 2 years ago, it started flowing again. So as far back as 1980, that water has been running. It's just the way it is before the trench was dug. There was never any trench or anything there. The water just came out. Probably with the invasion of the ivy, it may have blocked the opening of the pipe a little bit, which caused some of the flow to slow down a little bit. The question that I have is, if there were problems with this pipe, how come nobody bothered to contact me and ask me about it? That's the thing that really annoys me, is that I'm the property owner, but I am the one that's in violation and I did nothing. So yeah, I'm glad to work with anybody. I've actually hired Preschool Engineering to resurvey my property to actually define where that property line is. There used to be markers on that property and they have disappeared. I think they disappeared long before the tree cutting took place. So that property line will be reestablished. From what we can gather, the pipe is on 7 Featherbed, but most of the ditch that was dug is on 391. So it's mostly on my property, which is why I hired Matt Davison to meet the requirements that I had to meet in the letter.
There's one more hand
up. Ms. Graves, would you like to?
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. So I'm just here to provide a little bit of further context of this scenario. So actually my neighbor, if you're facing 11 Featherbed Lane to the right, 9 Featherbed Lane, has had an addition built onto their house, and they have actually had a company come out and put a camera into the pipe and scope it out. And I'm not savvy on what any of this means really, but I do know that this, according to the documentation that 9 Featherbed Lane had received, this pipe flows exactly like Jimmy said, and Jamie, through all of our houses and stops at 7 Featherbed. From my understanding in the past, 7 Featherbed Lane basement has actually been fully flooded due to clogging of the pipe. And then that has pushed down to 9 Featherbed. And then as the tornado hit and Jimmy's yard was torn up and the trees got, had to get cleared, it seemed to become even more of an issue. And on top of that, the neighbors at 7 Featherbed Lane cleared that entire property that was full of beautiful trees and ivy. And I can only imagine that the chips from that and the dirt and the sediment must have obviously, I would assume, clogged the pipe even more. So, I mean, I'm pretty annoyed too, considering my basement has had 2 feet of water in it and I have significant damage. My backyard is eroded along with Jim's backyard. And I apologize, Mr. Smith. I was not part of the clearing. However, if I knew it was your property, I'm sure, and I know Jimmy very well, I'm sure that we would have both, come to you and had spoken to you. But unfortunately, I guess from seeing it, it looks like it's 7 Featherbed's property since they've done the clearing of the land. So I don't think that part was clear to us. But overall, I'm hoping that we can just figure out a solution to stop the flooding from happening and also ensuring that the soil and the property is where it needs to be without any harm.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Does anyone know who hired the tree removal company?
The people at 7 Featherbed, they're not here tonight, but they were at the was it the January 10th meeting that we were at? I was at that meeting, but I didn't say anything. They say that they hired a tree company to cut down trees in the back of their house. And the tree company that they hired supposedly hired a subcontracting tree company. And apparently there was some misinformation and they clear cut all the trees on 391 East Main Street and on 7 Featherbed. I actually spoke with the company that did the tree cutting, and that's what they told me. They told me that they were told that all those trees were owned by 7 Featherbed and they were all to come down. They've cut down, I would say, at least 15 trees on my property. So there was some kind of a misunderstanding. That happens, from what I understand. It shouldn't, but it does. And so after everybody was aware that they went over the property line, the work stopped. Nothing has been done except for spreading around wood chips. Nothing has been done on that property since the trees were cut down. So that's how those trees got cut down. There was apparently some misinformation between tree companies or something, and they cut all the wrong trees down. So that's how the trees got cut down on my property.
And to add to that, as Mr. Smith mentioned, there's an abundance of wood chips that have been put down and over where the drain was. So I could again assume that another issue of our drain clogging is from these chips that were placed down. And yeah, if you just turn right on Featherbed Lane, you now see completely cleared land. It's absolutely amazing. And by amazing, I mean astonishing on how sad it is that these trees are gone and what we have to deal with now.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, don't we have an issue with, that much of the canopy now gone with invasives coming in and
so
is
the commission
going to be addressing that?
The commission discussed that at the January meeting and reviewed the report from Bob Russo. And at that time, the commission determined that no action was needed based on Bob Russo's report, which indicated no replanting needed to happen because there was still ivy holding everything in place. There was no ground disturbance. The main concern really is, again, like you were saying, invasive species and thermal regulation. And a lot of the water is coming through a pipe, going into another pipe. Thermal regulation isn't a huge concern in this stretch. And then the ivy is not native, but is pretty much going to smother other invasive species from coming in. So the commission decided that, I think that coupled with the fact that there was the misunderstanding and different property owners involved, and that the property owner of where most of the activity occurred was not the person that did the activity, to not require further action. But I think now that this additional activity has occurred, there's been more disturbance, and there's obviously some concerns about flooding, that some sort of long-term plan needs to be established. And if that's just seeding it and stabilizing it, that's fine. If there are further concerns regarding flooding, I would advise those property owners to discuss that with 391 East Main Street and try and fold something into a plan that everyone is comfortable and happy with. So that way that can get approved and implemented. It might just be that the pipe needs to either get cleaned out or replaced. I don't know. So that would be something that the owners of the pipes would probably want to look into. But I think that it's clear that there's a drainage / flooding problem. And as it relates to the water course, I think that this is a good time to try and address it. And I'm more than happy to meet with anyone out there if we want to reschedule a time that works for multiple parties to be present at the same time so that everyone's on the same page. I'm more than happy to do that.
Yeah, if the water is going to continue to flow the way it is, as long as we clean it up and make it look nice, I have no objections to the way that trench is there. I know that Matt said that he's going to put something down so that it cuts down the erosion and stuff like that. So if that's going to solve the flooding problems up from the pipe, I don't have a problem with that. Just as long as we clean up the property and make it look nice. I don't know if we can put a pipe in to take it all the way to the culvert in a pipe. I don't know how much that would cost. That way we wouldn't have to worry about that. Then we could fill it all in and put whatever plantings or whatever. No, that may be an option.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think what I'm hearing is that there are two things that the commission will be looking for in the near future. One of them is something to address the notice of violation and to deal with stabilizing the ground that is no longer stabilized, and that we would need a plan for that. And that that may be just some seed, just to get some vegetation there. And then it also sounds like you want to potentially submit an application for maintenance of that pipe. And because those two things would be, I believe, separate. And so that's my thinking at the moment. Not sure how the rest of the commission, or Jamie, if that sounds right to you, but I think that's what we're walking away with tonight.
Commissioner Basserman, just a question, Jamie, when you addressed Commissioner Boda's comment. Jurisdiction-wise, we certainly, have jurisdiction over the first item that Commissioner Boda mentioned. What about the pipe and the fact that it's a private pipe? What's our jurisdiction there?
So I think it might be a jurisdictional ruling request. I think it depends on what activity is being proposed. If it's clearing the pipe, I think as long as there's an erosion control plan in place to make sure that whatever's being cleared out doesn't end up down the water course, whether that's using a dewatering bag or something like that to capture anything that comes out of the pipe. I think so. Section 4.1E of the regulations, and this is per state statute. Maintenance relating to any drainage pipe which existed before the effective date of any municipal regulations adopted pursuant to Connecticut General Statute, Section 22A, 42A, or July 1st, 1974, whichever is earlier, provided such pipe is on property which is zoned as residential, but which does not contain hydrophilic vegetation. For the purposes of this subdivision, maintenance means the removal of accumulated leaves, soil, and other debris, whether by hand or machine, while the pipe remains in place. So if it's just cleaning out the pipe, I think that would be an as of right activity. If it's replacing the pipe, I think that would require a permit. Certainly, you know, if there's flooding concerns at hand, that's something that the commission considers when reviewing these things. So I think the first step would be for the owners to determine what activity needs to happen. And as far as piping the rest of it, as far as direct wetland impacts and watercourse impacts go, the commission tries to avoid having those happen unless they're absolutely necessary. And usually there's mitigation required if you're doing that. I think also keeping it an open channel is probably better. There's less underground pipe that you can't inspect. It's just a matter of keeping that outlet clear and unobstructed. And so just, you know, whether that means somebody goes out there and inspects it regularly, just visually, is there any debris there, and removing it before it becomes an issue by hand. I think that the way the water course is now graded, it's probably not likely to cause much issues as long as that outlet is routinely inspected and the pipe itself is functioning properly. But I'm not an expert, so.
Well, and again, Commissioner Boda, I think the stabilization issue, that was a lot of, I mean, it looks like a lot of exposed, from the pictures, it looks like mud. And so I think before, you know, even just some quick like seed just to go down to make sure if the ivy isn't there, we need something to address the notice of violation, just to stabilize while they're working out the rest. Yeah,
I think absolutely the primary concern at this point is restoring the disturbed area. I think if there were any further concerns regarding that water course area and flooding concerns, it would be a good time for everyone to get on the same page on that, so that that can be addressed. And as far as the flooding concerns, I mean, that can come back whenever the appropriate parties are concerned or ready. And again, if it's simply cleaning the pipe, it would probably be an as of right activity. However, there would need to be some sort of erosion control plan to make sure that there's no negative impacts to the water course. Do any of the property owners have any questions at this time?
Okay.
Dave Smith. I think Matt is going to has a plan to stabilize that. And when we talked and when we met, I think he said that it wouldn't take him very long to get that that stabilized there. So we'll just have to wait for him to send you the information and get it approved. So.
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, my question, I guess, for the commission would be, do you want to schedule a special meeting to review that plan? If the activity is completely outside of the water course, I suppose you could authorize me to do it administratively. However, I think they were proposing a couple of plugs perhaps in the water course area. Or are you comfortable waiting until April 14th for that activity to occur?
This is Commissioner Boda. I would like to see, just because of the location to all of that running water, I would like to see it stabilized as quickly as possible. And like I just said with the other, I mean, it's been precipitating a lot and frequently. So I would hate to see it exposed for very long.
Okay, so would you say that you're comfortable with staff approving administratively the stabilization plan, and any further details shall be approved or reviewed at the April 14th meeting?
Yes.
I'd just like to further clarify, as far as parties being involved with having to stabilize that property, I'm assuming that's the owner of 411 East Main Street and then also 7 Featherbed Lane, because the other houses were not responsible for the clearing of that property. Unfortunately, we're just the ones being affected.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So ultimately, property owners are responsible. However, violators are also responsible. So I think that might be something that the person who did activity and who owns the activity should discuss, but certainly anybody that was not involved in conducting any activity or in owning the property would be held responsible, unless they want to contribute to it to try and have a say in what happens. But that would be up to you guys to figure out.
Any last words? So as it stands right now, just to be clear, you're meeting tomorrow unless homeowners contact you and say they would like to be part of that and it needs to be rescheduled. You're meeting tomorrow, Jamie?
Yeah, I'm meeting tomorrow with Jim and Mr. Smith. Are you available tomorrow? Do we say tomorrow at 11:30? Are you available tomorrow at 11:30, Mr. Smith, to join us?
This is Dave Smith. Yeah, I'm available at 11:30 tomorrow.
Okay. That way we can see both ends of the pipe. That'd be helpful. Okay.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant for 11 Pondview Terrace for the homeowner?
I believe they did just join.
We do, yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, let's see. I think Jamie sent out a sketch of the 11 Pondview Terrace property. This is an NOV for the placement of wood chips within the upland review area resulting from removal of stored damaged trees within the conservation easement. Jamie, what's going on here?
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, we did receive a plan. It's a meadow type plan proposing seed with a conservation seed mix. And I believe the maintenance was basically intended to be for about 5 years and then hopefully kind of teeter off. Is that correct, Scott?
Yes, and thank you guys for accommodating my schedule. I had my son's basketball game, so yeah, it's pretty straightforward, I think.
Your name and address, please.
Okay, Scott Penner, 11 Pondview Terrace in Branford. So yeah, I mean, I spoke with one of the people that have worked on landscaping at my house, and I don't think it's going to be too difficult there to get the wildflowers and the conservation mix to grow. But you know, I guess we'll see. But it didn't seem like anyone had any doubts that it would take. So.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'm not sure if everyone had a chance to take a look at the plan. I can pull it up real quick, maybe. So again, just to remind everybody, single family residential property, there's conservation easement in the rear. Some trees were damaged again during that 2020 storm events. So the activity occurred, and looking to kind of restore that area to a natural type habitat. And this is the approximate area of where the activity is proposed. There were some wood chips here too, which were to be raked out, which would also be something that would get followed up on. The seed mix being proposed is a New England Wetland Plants seed mix, New England Conservation Wildlife mix. And then there are some reference details regarding the seeding process and the mowing maintenance. The seed mix will be, in accordance with the guidance we have received, we will be mowing every 4 to 6 weeks to a height of 4 to 6 inches. Over the first 5 years, we will replant as necessary to ensure meadow grows in that location. I did call New England Wetland Plants today because I was taking another look at the guidance document I sent over, which is from UConn. And 4 to 6 weeks seemed a little aggressive to me. So they recommended mowing when it gets to about knee high and cutting it to 8 inches. So I'm expecting to receive a document from them outlining that. I think that maybe kind of using both of those references to kind of balance out the mowing frequency, particularly in the first year or two while it's establishing. So the main reason why you mow a meadow is to get rid of annual weeds and then to prevent woody vegetation from coming in. So in the first 2 years, you're really trying to get rid of those annual weeds. So you want to cut it before it goes to seed. But if you cut it for every 4 to 6 weeks to 4 to 6 inches, then I'm a little bit concerned about the vegetation that you're trying to keep. So I think maybe just working out with the property owner a little bit of clarification on that mowing frequency and height might still be in order, but I think the seed mix being proposed is a good one. It's one that we see. And I think keeping on top of it for 5 years is pretty reasonable with the reseeding as needed. The one thing that the plan does not touch on is watering. So I just wanted to check in, is it going to be any issue to keep the seed mix watered while it's establishing?
No, I'll make sure it's watered, but it's actually at the bottom of, I mean, you saw it, it's kind of at the bottom of a hill. So it usually is pretty wet down there. So it should be fine, but if not, I'll water it. Because it's shaded from the trees too, so it really doesn't get like dried out down there.
Commissioner Basserman, the other thing is this something that needs to have a formal monitoring for 5 years?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So at the last meeting, the commission indicated that they were okay with the owner kind of coming up with a plan. So I think it would be appropriate to kind of check in and do follow-up inspections at the staff level, but I don't know that we need formal monitoring reports. So basically kind of checking in and making sure that it is being mowed like a meadow and that it is being reseeded as needed so that it fills in once a year annually for, the commission usually does 3 to 5 years, depending on the scope of the project. And it could also be depending on the success of the first. If it's successful for 3 years, then maybe 3 years is all that's necessary. If the first couple of years are questionable, then maybe extending it.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission for the homeowner?
No, this is Commissioner Boda. I just thank you for the plan. I think I hope in the end it ends up, if you like it, it's nice for your family. It is nice to have a meadow like that, and it's a good compromise to maintain the conservation easement. And I would just second Jamie's comment about double checking on the frequency and the height. Some of the plants that you have on that list they're tall plants, like the Joe Pye weed and the goldenrod. All of that gets really long, tall. And so I'm not sure that it would really flower in the way that it's meant to flower if it's cut down with that kind of frequency. They bloom late in the summer. So I would also agree to just check on the frequency. So, but they're great plants, and it's good for a conservation area.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm okay mowing it less. That was just what the document that I read said. So.
Yeah. Typically, for some of those conservation meadows in stretches that we have in town, they'll mow in very, very early spring, and then sometime around November 1st.
So the document that I sent, it's specific. It's a, I think, a 3-page document that tries to explain everything about meadow maintenance generally. So it does say to prevent weeds from growing too tall and outcompeting the desired perennials, mow every 4 to 6 weeks to a height of 4 to 6 inches. Mowing frequency may need to be extended based on speed of establishment and amount of available rainfall. Mowing should be frequent enough to prevent weeds from growing. It also talks a little bit about the difference, like what's in your seed mix. And so that's kind of like focused more on grass seed mixes. And I think with the diversity of the seed mix, letting it grow a little bit taller is going to help promote its growth. So I think that's something that maybe we can work out. And if the commission's comfortable with the plan, the 2 things I would recommend is or I guess there's 3, that mowing frequency be worked out, and the watering. And then the 3rd one would be, it does say tilling if necessary. So depending on the amount of ground disturbance, possibly spreading non-seed bearing hay or straw or something like that over the seed mix when spread, just to make sure there's no erosion concerns, but also, again, the area stays kind of wet. So I don't think worrying about the seed drying out is too much of a concern at this site, but the main concern would be erosion.
Yeah, I mean, just so you guys know, we're all kind of on the same, trying to get the same goal here. I don't want a bunch of weeds back there, and I don't want it to look bad. So I'll, if it's okay with you guys, I'll just keep it looking like, you know, wildflower meadow, because that's what I would prefer anyway. So, and if it means mowing a little less or mowing more or whatever, I don't want those in really. We have the really bad weeds around here, those really tall ones that are real strong. So that's all I'll try to keep out of there. So
Great.
I think Suzanne.
Yeah. So this is Commissioner Boda. Just maybe take a look at what some of those plants look like, because it may be that the goldenrod looks like a weed to you initially. I mean, we see it on roadsides, and some folks may identify it as a weed, but it's an important plant in our environment. Same thing with the Joe Pye weed. It says Joe Pye weed, like that's part of the name. So you're gonna perhaps wanna get to know what some of those plants look like, because you may initially want to dismiss them as weeds, but they're gonna be part of your seed mix.
Okay.
And also, just kind of a side note, a lot of people think they're allergic to goldenrod, but they're allergic to ragweed, which blooms at the same time. So don't get rid of it because you think you're allergic to it.
Okay.
Things you never knew.
Yes.
All right, thank you much. We're into other business now.
All right, 1 minute. Wait, before we move on, can we just have a vote on what the commission's consensus is here, so that way I can follow up with a letter and we can get this off the agenda? And does the commission want any follow-up reports after the inspections? Do you want like an annual follow-up report for 3 years or something like that?
This is Commissioner Boda. I would accept this plan with the, and this is a general consensus, right? Because this is not an application, right? Or do you want a motion?
I would like a motion.
Hold on one second. I knew you were gonna say that. Hold on. I need the address. Okay. So I will make a motion to accept the application for 11 Pondview Terrace. I don't have the number here.
It would be
go
the
ahead.
plan, I think, instead of the application. It's
For the plan. I don't have the number. I have too many windows open now with the, I want the item number.
We don't
It'll be-
have numbers too.
Doesn't have an item number.
All right.
We
So
probably should.
the plan for 11 Pondview Terrace to address the removal of trees in the conservation easement with the condition that the mowing schedule be revisited and that there be annual inspections which can be done with town in conjunction with town staff for no less than 3 years, possibly extending to 5 years.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? And I guess we'll take a roll call vote at this point. Commissioner Grenache,
Commissioner Ganalt, aye.
Commissioner Panaro,
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Papadonis,
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Steinberg,
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Begeman,
Commissioner Begamon, aye.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. Good luck.
Thank you.
Now, moving on to other business. Regulation revisions, the continued review of possible revisions to the inland wetland and water courses. Excuse me, regulations. There was additional material sent out in the Dropbox. And obviously we had a discussion last meeting. Jamie, regarding the bonds, we're not talking about bonds this evening.
No. So I had a preliminary discussion with town council, and I am hoping to have a follow-up discussion next week. So I think we should wait and see how far we get through the regulations this evening, and from there maybe discuss whether the commission wants to continue and review those bond regulations as part of this revision. But I do not have that for tonight.
Where should we begin?
This is Commissioner Boda. I'm in the Dropbox and I'm looking for, to see the adopted regulations. I'm looking for the ones that have the markup, that are marked up.
So
which folder are they in?
if you click on 4A regulation revisions, one is the summary that outlines everything, and then 2A is the track changes of the latest revisions.
Wait, but what folder is it in? Is it in today's meeting materials? It's not.
Yes.
Okay, hold on. I see it. Thank you. And now, okay, so the 3-4 draft regulation with track changes on.
Yes.
That one.
Yep. And so I also have the summary of changes. I grayed out the things we discussed at the last meeting so that we don't have to discuss those. We can either start with the heavy hitters and start with 7.6A, which the commission started to look at the last meeting and tabled, or we can start off with some of the easy stuff that we haven't addressed yet and circle back around. Any votes?
Why don't we start with the heavy stuff while we're still fresh?
Alrighty. Can everyone see it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the first thing we have in for today is 7.6. This is our stormwater. Well, it's BMPs and specifically the stormwater requirement for retention of the first inch. We're clarifying and modifying it to be retention of the stormwater quality volume, providing a calculation for how that is calculated. And that comes straight out of the 2002 Connecticut Stormwater Quality or 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual as amended. And then I think the biggest changes beyond that is deciding whether or not to provide language for separating out redevelopment from new development. So I guess 7.6A11 says, in the case of redevelopment of a site with 40% or more direct connection of impervious areas to the stormwater system, at least 50% of the water quality volume shall be retained by retention and infiltration on site unless it is demonstrated why it is not feasible or prudent to do so. Whereas usually currently the commission requires the entire stormwater quality volume, but still provides the out for demonstrating why it is not prudent and or feasible to do so. So I think that was the big, that, and then also number 2, this requirement may be waived for projects with less than 1,000 square feet of disturbance and for projects that have been determined to be de minimis by the agency or its duly authorized agent. I think there was a little bit of question as to whether we wanted to keep that with less than 1,000 square feet of disturbance, or if we wanted to try and find a less ambiguous way of stating that. Or perhaps just keep it relevant for de minimis projects.
This Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, is this now inconsistent with the deep suggested requirements, the model regs?
So this was not a part of the model regs. And I don't think it's inconsistent necessarily with, I don't think it's inconsistent with the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual, because we're still saying it has to be treated if you're not retaining it if you're not retaining the stormwater quality volume, you still have to treat it with secondary treatment practices. So it's still complying with the Stormwater Quality Manual. So the reason why I am suggesting 7.6A11 is because of the MS4 permit requirements, which allow for a break for redevelopment. It doesn't mean that the Inland Wetland Commission has to. They're 2 separate regulatory bodies. I just thought I'd throw it in there as a possible consideration. The one thing that wetland regulations do have to do right now regarding MS4 permit requirements is we have to remove barriers to low impact development. And I don't think we have barriers to low impact development. The town hired a consultant to review the inland wetland and planning and zoning regulations, and they did not seem to think that we had any barriers to low impact development either. So we've checked the box that the Inland Wetland Agency has to check for the MS4 requirements.
This is Commissioner Basserman again. If I were a contractor, I would be looking at the MS4 requirements as kind of the basis for my engineering, no?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Nation, I think it kind of, it depends on the project, the scope of the project. I mean, a lot of people that regularly do work in town know that the Inland Wetland Commission has the 1 inch requirement. I believe planning and zoning also has retention of the first inch requirement. But I think the MS4 permit is granting a reduction, and if the commission is interested in doing the same, it kind of makes sense. However, it's also kind of not necessary because you do have or demonstrate why it is not feasible or prudent to do so. So, I mean, this is also something that we could, table and put aside for a future regulation revision as something the commission might want to consider after some additional consideration. But it's not uncommon for the commission to be granting some sort of reduction of the stormwater quality volume retention on-site requirement for I don't know that you necessarily need to come up with the same numbers that the MS4 permit came up with and build yourself into that particular box, but
This is Commissioner Bowser, but I do like, in some respect, the fact that you know, there's supposedly a science that went into those determinations in MS4 as opposed to something more arbitrary. But I guess my question is does this give us less control or more control than we currently have?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland agent. I think it kind of depends, particularly on how you define redevelopment. I think in the sense of giving a lower benchmark for sites that have challenges in meeting that 1 inch, it's easier for them to obtain. And so you might get more because it seems like a more approachable requirement. But also, like a site that's redeveloped where they're using the existing building, maybe modifying it slightly, versus a site where they're demoing and removing everything and regrading and building a new building, that's still redevelopment. Do you want both of those to be considered the same way with stormwater management, or do you want to define those two separately? I don't know. So right now, I think the biggest thing the commission's looking to do with this regulation revision is address the fee changes that we've kind of been looking at for, I think, 1.5 years now. And also update the regulations per statutory changes. So this is something that we could continue to try and review and figure out this evening, or like I said, it's something that we could keep in our notes for possible future changes if there's too many outstanding questions regarding it still. Or if the commission's satisfied with the way it is, then we can move forward with putting it in the language we send up to DEEP.
This is Commissioner Boda. I need just a minute, please.
This is Commissioner Finaro. Are we going over this, or we're waiting for Suzanne?
I think Commissioner Boda is trying to finish the thought process and then have a comment.
No, I just had a sick kid come in.
Oh.
We're a very germy household at the moment. I'm not going to make it very long tonight, but so with this section, I think that the first, these are my personal feelings. I appreciate the one and the kind of the thought of trying to maybe potentially encourage redevelopment over new development, as it were. I'm not sure about the numbers with the 40% or at least 50%, but the rest of it I think is good. I think is reasonable. The shift to the water quality volume, so we can be a little bit more specific, and then the inclusion of the formula I think the may be waived for de minimis activity makes sense. I think I need to think a little bit more about the 1.2 with this built-in language for redevelopment. I just don't know what I think about it just yet.
So on that thought process, I wasn't sure what the commission's thoughts would be. I did copy over the MS4 stormwater general permit definition of redevelopment. And I tried looking around for some other definitions, but they're mostly fairly vague and basically saying it's the act of redeveloping. So if the commission is interested in keeping section 76A11 and wants to provide a definition of redevelopment so that's clear to applicants who that entails, then we can work a little bit more on a definition for redevelopment as well. I did show this definition to the town engineer, and I think he had a couple of concerns regarding the clarity of it. So I think that would benefit from some wordsmithing. If the commission thinks they might be interested in keeping section 76A11, I can work a little bit more on getting that definition or more options for the definition available for the next meeting.
Yeah, and this is Commissioner Boda again. I guess part of the, so did those percentages, and I'm sorry if I missed, if you said, like I said, because we're a Jeremy house at the moment, and my brain is a little Jeremy, I think. So I don't know if you had said where that 40 and 50% came from. If you had specified, what did that come from?
Those numbers come from the MS4 permit that the town has to comply with. The stormwater permit. So as far as complying with the MS4 requirements and what will be the stormwater ordinance, that would be the requirement for the MS4 general permit. So that's why I proposed those numbers instead of any other numbers. And why I copied their definition of redevelopment.
Sure, that makes sense. I think, okay, I mean, I think I'm interested in kind of putting a pin in 1.1. It is interesting. I think it would be, and I'm wondering if other towns have incorporated this, and if other towns have incorporated it with numbers that are encourage a little bit more capture than the at least 50%. So often with some of those, the state guidance, you know, we can be a little bit more protective of the wetlands and water courses than the state does. So I'm curious if anybody else has done something similar and maybe gotten a little more protective of the wetlands and water courses.
This is Commissioner Begemon. That's my question is, why is there less of a requirement for a site being redeveloped than a new site?
Jamie Frederick, an agent. I think the intent is, so usually like if the site's already kind of maxed out and it has stormwater from say the 70s, it's not going to meet today's standards probably. And so bringing it up to having at least 50% of the water quality volume retained on site is an improvement over the existing condition. So you're improving something that's already maybe not an ideal situation. Whereas with a new development, you're taking an undisturbed, well, maybe an undisturbed parcel, maybe a not recently disturbed parcel, and creating a new activity. And so you have almost every opportunity, theoretically, to install stormwater improvements. Of course, there's certain things that prevent that, such as high groundwater table. And so that's why or demonstrate why it is not proven and or feasible to do so language exists.
This is Commissioner Boda, and we've seen a number of these even recently. I feel like the redevelopment up on the hill by those storage facilities, that's like a redevelopment of existing property, and then they kind of built out beyond, but you know, they were tapping into some existing work there. And so like versus some of the other stuff that we've seen maybe on the eastern side of town, or even like at the Aldi's, that like some of the back of that is all new development. So if an area is already impervious, and we can have them treat some of that water as opposed to just pumping it into a state system or the Branford River, then that's preferable. Yeah, I think just like I said, I'm curious about that at least 50% piece. If there's, I just need to think about it a little bit.
Well, it sounds like just Commissioner Basserman, there was a question from Commissioner Boda about whether other towns have moved in this direction, Jamie. Maybe that is something you guys can take a look at. And we'll revisit this at the next meeting. Meanwhile, commissioners can think about whether this is something that's in line with, you know, our charter to protect the environment, and whether, as Commissioner Boda talked about and Jamie, what the kind of orientation for this is and whether it's worth the change.
And can we, do other folks agree that, you know, that first part, the just one point nothing, and then 1.2, 1.3, that those are okay? Because I mean, I would be happy with those, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. 76A11, and I'll send an email out probably to like the town planners listserv. I know that there's some in the wetland agents on there, and see if I can get any comments back from anybody if they've done anything to address this, either from a wetland standpoint and or a planning and zoning standpoint.
Jamie, this is Commissioner Basserman. Maybe touch base with Darcy as well.
All right, I'll see if I can get a hold of Darcy as well. All right, moving on.
Moving on.
All right. Next one is just deleting an extra space, getting rid of the specific reference to the definition and just definitions in general, so that we don't have to change it every time we add or remove a word. And 710 is our next substantial one, and I can't get it all in one screenshot so that you guys can read it. So 710 is kind of the, if compensation is proposed or required for section 7.9 of these regulations, a management plan is required. So I'm kind of proposing to change this a little bit, and then to say if compensation is not required for 7.9 of these regulations, the agency may require a management plan. However, not all of the requirements outlined below may apply. So basically 7.9 is if you impact 750 square feet of wetlands or more, then boom, you have to do 710. And then I'm trying to just modify the language at the start of 710 so that if you're proposing to do compensation, but you're not required to do compensation, you're not necessarily held to all of the requirements. So I'm kind of restructuring a lot and trying to clarify some of the things and kind of restructure it to be in the application section of the regulations. This language was originally in section 11, which I can't think of what that section is, but so I just wanted to kind of apply more to an applicant in the application phase rather than kind of general. Yeah, so 11 is decision process and permit. Kind of, so it's kind of more structured towards the condition side of things. Does the commission want me to just kind of read it out loud, or does the commission want to read it themselves?
I can read it myself.
Agree. I had a question about 710-4, and you write out best management practices, and earlier was it BMP? Or just
that is actually a good point, because I think we should be consistent in whether we're spelling that out or abbreviating it. That language is from the current regulations, and I think it used to say or, and I changed it to and because or didn't make sense. But I'll take a look at BMP versus best management practices to make sure it's consistent throughout the regulations.
Have a best management practice on it.
Hey, Jamie, Commissioner Basserman, is the compensation not requiring section, is that something that's a new thought for us, a new direction for us, or is in practice, this is what we've been doing anyways?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
On second sentence, when compensation is not required. Have we had instances where compensation is not required?
Yes, absolutely. So,
and that's been our practice, to not have the full extent of the management plan being required? Yeah,
and there's been times where like the commission has reduced the monitoring from 5 years to 3 years. And I'm trying to also parse out kind of like when it's acceptable for the monitoring reports to be done by the agent versus when it should be done by a hired professional. So I think if mitigation is required for 7.9, it should always be reported by wetland scientists, botanists kind of thing. If it's something where it's a homeowner and they're throwing in some sort of mitigation to help make the application look a little bit nicer, then the commission might want to give them a little bit of breaks because it's not required.
Okay, thank you.
Clarifying that in the regulation would be good.
So this is Commissioner Bassman. At this point, we're only looking basically at 710 A, B, and C.
There's also D, which is off the page. You can't see it.
Well, D, it talks about the bond, right?
Yeah.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I don't have any, I think that this the changes to 710 A, B, and C clarify and codify the practices we've been trying to be as consistent and fair as possible.
Yeah.
And it allows for some nuance, like the shift from the 6 months and years to really being about the growing season, which is I think what we were trying to get at.
Yeah,
that's yeah. I mean, there
challenging.
Yeah,
it's always been challenging to get on the same page with applicants on that. So I think this kind of clarifies it into pretty straightforward. This is what it means.
Yeah, I think you captured it nicely. I appreciate
and I
that.
may or may not have stolen that from practice of some soil scientists. So it's common practice for the soil scientists that are proposing these plans to kind of propose this language. So I think kind of going back to the water quality volume versus the first inch, it just gets us on the same page as the lingo that the professionals are using. So we're not butting heads all the time. So that was one of the big concerns that I had that I wanted to make sure everyone was comfortable with, was changing it over to the growing season. Another one was going backwards to 710B. I'm not sure if the second part of number 1 is necessary. I mean, I think it kind of folds into the 85% survival. Does the commission want to keep that highlighted language in or remove it? Because I think we discussed last time, more words isn't necessarily always better.
Yeah, I don't think it really adds, because you can capture the plugs within the vegetation, and it just doesn't really matter if it's seeds or plugs.
Sure. Okay, so we'll remove that. And then I'll go backwards one more to 710A, number 3. I put in short and long-term invasive species management. That's not something we always see in every single report. I'm not sure if that's something that the commission wants to see in every report. I think at the very least, they could address whether or not they're proposing anything, and then the commission could go from there. Does that sound?
I liked the addition of I liked the addition, because that is part of the issue that we see, is like that the short term with the initial construction and the long term over the maintenance plan or the planting plan. So I like it, having both. I want another word, extra words.
This Commissioner Basserman, Commissioner Boda, your comment on the plugs versus seeds, I guess question, do seeds have a, do plugs have a better catch rate and survivability than seed, or does it depend on the application, or is it not worth getting into, I guess, at this point?
I don't know if it matters. I don't know this is Commissioner Boda. I don't know the answer to your question, but I think from a ground cover perspective, if we're talking about 85%, I don't know that, and then whether they use plugs or seeds is going to depend on the what's happening on the ground, literally and metaphorically. And so I think the 85 captures what we need to be captured.
Yeah. Plugs and seed mix are usually proposed for different kind of intents. A lot of times we'll see plugs in the actual wetland and seed mixes adjacent, and then also they usually will sometimes overcast where they're putting the plugs with a seed mix as well to help make sure it fills in all the way. So that I think is really more dependent upon what is proposed, and usually the commission doesn't really take too much concern with plugs versus seed mix. I think unless it was like a direct wetland impact and they're proposing to just use a seed mix, then I think the commission might be a bit concerned.
Commissioner Bowser, just one other question, and I know it's not a change, but in the term qualified ecologist or wetland specialist, who determines the qualification?
I suppose that would probably be in the wetland staff, and if in the wetland staff had concern, they might bring it to the commission. I've never seen it really raised as an issue. Usually it's not, it hasn't been an issue. The question has really been whether or not the agent can do the inspection rather than the ecologist or the wetlands scientist.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think for me, when I see something like that, it's really about making sure that, you know, sometimes we'll have engineers or attorneys try to speak to something that's really not their purview. And so we just want to make sure that the people with the right academic background and experience are the ones speaking to, in this case, planting issues.
Okay.
So the next question I have is 710A4. I'm not really sure what that language adds, but it doesn't hurt anything either. Does the commission want to keep it? Again, I think that it originally said or other activity, and it should definitely say and other activity as specified in best management practices as defined in section 2.1C of these regulations.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. It certainly saves us if something's a close call and doesn't quite fit into any of the other pegs. You know, the pegs don't fit into any of the other holes. I don't see any harm in it.
Yeah, and I suppose it helps open the door for the commission to request specific things that might reference back to that section.
Sounds like a keeper.
So does anyone have any questions regarding 710 through C?
Good to go.
So we'll scroll down and look at 710D. So historically, the commission has set the bond amount during the permit review process. And so the condition of approval will say what the bond amount is. Current practice in recent years has been to have that bond amount figured out after the fact. So originally in 710, basically all it said is a bond in accordance with section 13 shall be posted for a period of no less than 5 years. So I wanted to change that again to reflect if you're only requiring monitoring for 3 years, then the bond obviously is only 3 years. Erosion controls, oftentimes it would be realistic to return that portion of the bond if the site is stabilized before 5 years. So looking to make it kind of more general again, and also provide for that estimate that we get after the approval's been issued to be done prior to the approval being issued, and also set kind of an expiration date for that because prices will change over time. So if they don't start the project and submit the bond in 2 years, then they have to submit an updated bond estimate, but all of the items will have already been spelled out, and it'll just be a matter of updating it for current market prices. So that's what I was looking to accomplish with the new 7D.
I think you mean must be reassessed.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I did notice that. Yes, I do.
This Commissioner Melissa, just Finaro, it's in 4. You have the. I think that is, any measures that, an extra the.
Yes.
I think this is Commissioner Boda. I think the substance is appropriate.
Is the commission interested in keeping the language regarding the 10% installation / maintenance contingency as it applies to plantings?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Boda. I liked the 10%, especially with what's happening right now. You know, there's a lot of inflation going on, and then sometimes we see that you know, things are installed by one group and then they don't install it correctly and it fails, and you know, the installation needs to happen again. And so I think building in a cushion is wise.
Okay. Any more thoughts, questions, comments on 7-10?
Seems pretty comprehensive.
Okay.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I know that this work has to be done. I need to go to sleep early tonight. Like I said, everybody in the house is very abruptly sick. Yay, the fun of public schools. We've all gone, everybody's, anyway. So I need to head out. I don't know if you guys, how much longer you're gonna keep going, but I need to back out.
All right. Appreciate you being here. Hope you feel better.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Bye, good night.
Night.
Where's everybody else? You want to keep going here?
How much more
Before
is it?
I don't think we have a bunch more, and I think there's only one more thing that will have some discussion to it. And we've already kind of mentioned continuing some of these items. So I think if we can just kind of quickly run through some of these, then hopefully we'll get to a point where at the next meeting we can wrap everything up. So if you guys have like another 20 minutes in you, 20 minutes, half an hour max.
And what's the suggestion? We'll deal with everything up to fees and then table it?
Pretty much, yeah. So the fees is the only thing that if you wanted to discuss, but if you could also just table before we get there. So, ready to keep going?
Yeah, let's
Pretty simple.
let's keep going. And public hearings, is that next? Or
so 8.4 was just correcting a reference to the Connecticut general statutes, so no discussion. Then next is 9.3, which is the public hearing notice. So there's kind of two points to this one. One is I put in language for the commission to consider of requiring notice go to everybody within 100 feet of the property. And that is because that's what planning and zoning requires. So if we have a public hearing and planning and zoning has a public hearing, it just makes it so that all the same people get notices, so that we don't end up with people coming to us afterwards and say, why did I get a notice for planning and zoning, but not inland wetlands? It's up to the commission if that's something you're interested in doing. I do think the commission should put in the notice requirements, basically stating when, where for the meeting and where the activity is proposed and what the activity is. So that way we know that the abutters are getting that particular information.
Commissioner Bassman, I like the idea of lining up, because to the extent we get into a situation where somebody was notified by planning and zoning and not notified by us, we don't need the potential negative thoughts that might ensue from that situation.
I don't think it really puts that much more burden on the applicant, and 100 feet usually doesn't really necessarily drag in too many more properties. But I think it just, to have it be uniform makes it a little bit more simple.
Makes sense.
This is Commissioner Finaro. Is it need to be mailed, like is email also okay? Or
no, they actually have to send it via certificates of mailing. So they have to go to the post office, and basically there's a form that they can fill out with all the addresses of who they're sending it to, and the post office stamps it with the day they sent it. So that way we know they sent it at the required time and they didn't just send it the day before, or they didn't send it.
And that's statute, isn't it?
So yes.
It's okay, sorry.
Yeah, so well, I mean, in the commission still has to publish their notices in the paper. For during COVID, we could publish it up to the website, but we're back to having to publish it in the paper. So the notice to abutters is not required per statute. However, the commission can require it per statute. The commission's allowed to require it per statute. And if the commission requires it, there's supposed to be a requirement that there be a certificate of mailing. So yes, it is paper, and they do have to go to the post office. They can't just drop it in their mailbox and have it sent out. But it's really not that complicated. And if you're going with 3, going with 6 isn't really much different. It's not a huge price difference in the cost of having that certificate either. So it's just more envelopes to stuff and address.
Sounds like you got an okay on this one.
All right, so keep both parts.
Yes.
Yeah.
No additional comments or concerns?
Nope.
Okay. So the next one, 9.5, again, is correcting a reference. It was referencing 8.3 of our regulations, and it should be referencing 8.2. I'm gonna assume there's no questions there. So next we're into 11.6, change inland wetland permit to inland wetlands and watercourses permit. Pretty straightforward. There's that 11. Yeah, so just adding in watercourses and making it all uppercase. 11.8 is where we get into some of the statute required changes. We had talked previously about adding its duly authorized agent. That goes back to right after we did the regulation revisions back in 2017. I think that it was realized that should probably be in there. So the statutes have made it so that an inland wetland permit shall not take effect until each such approval as applicable granted under such chapter has taken effect, such chapter being the zoning and planning chapters. So zoning approval, planning approval, affordable housing approval, etc. So basically they get their permit from us, they have to get a permit from planning and zoning. The inland wetland permit does not become effective until they get the approval from planning and zoning. And I think the reason why they did that is because the inland wetland permit expires based off of the planning and zoning approval. So they wanted to make sure those lined up. And then again, changing the expiration dates per state statute. If a permit issued prior to July 1st, 2011 was still in effect, July 12th, 2001, it shall be valid for a period of not less than 14 years, where it used to be 9, and shall be renewed pursuant to chapter section A of this section, so long as the total duration is not more than 19 years, where it used to be 14.
Is there need to, sorry, is Commissioner Pinar, is there need to be space after July 1st, 2011? Or is that my eyes?
I think there is a space.
There's space.
Yeah. Oh, wait, no, 2011. I'm looking at 20.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a space there too.
I think there might. Well, I'll double check. And then again, it's basically any permit that was issued prior to COVID that's still effective is now good for a minimum of 14 years and can be extended up to 19 years as long as the agency does not find that there's been a substantial change in circumstances which requires a new permit application or an enforcement action has been undertaken. And then moving forward, permits are still valid for, I believe it's, if planning and zoning approval is required, it's 5 years, maybe extended up to 10. So those are mostly, with the exception of adding or its duly authorized agent, that's the modifications there to comply with Public Act changes. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, so the next one is 1111C. This is again Public Act change. And again, it's just spelling out that the inland wetland watercourse permit shall not take effect until approval from planning and zoning has been granted. And again, changing inland wetlands and watercourses permit and capitalizing it. Any questions?
Nope.
Right.
Quick comment, I think chapter needs to be capitalized. Not sure. Chapter 124, 124B, 126.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. 13, we do not have. So this brings us back to the fees, and there's two outstanding questions. One is the fee amount, and the other is looking at subdivision referrals. We had started to talk about that at the last meeting, and I had mentioned that I think subdivision referrals without cause for regulated activity would basically be like a jurisdictional ruling request. So the question was, did we want to keep that at $50 or change it to $0 like we have for jurisdictional rulings? I don't know if the commission wants to dive into these questions tonight or table these to the next meeting.
Yeah, could I suggest we table them?
Sure.
Agree.
Agreed.
So then my follow-up question for the commission is, do you want to next discuss this at the April 12th meeting? Does the commission kind of want to fast track things and try and schedule a special meeting so that we can get the language up to date? Or do we want to just try and get everything finalized April 12th and sent up? The thing is, we cannot have the public hearing until at least 35 days after the notice is sent to DEEP. So if we wait until the April 12th, or sorry, April 14th meeting, pretty much the earliest we could open the public hearing would be May 26th, which would be a special meeting, or if we wanted to keep it to a regular meeting, it would be June 9th.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I also think we just need to reflect for a minute. You know, we've got in front of us a discussion of fees as well as discussion of the bonds. My concern is the discussion of both is going to be somewhat of an anchor on getting this process to the finish line. And where is the commission on trying to deal with the fees either at the next regularly scheduled meeting or a special meeting, and wrapping up that portion of the regulations to then be able to schedule a public hearing, or we wait until we have completed not only fees, but the bonds to do the same thing.
So I know this is a lot to take in, but I'll also just mention, we can do remote meetings through the end of April. And then after that, as long as there's no changes, we're gonna have to go back to in-person meetings. So if the commission thinks it might be helpful to review this remotely rather than having to get together in person, it can be reviewed at the April meeting. However, I also do not know what we'll have on the agenda for the regular meeting.
I one man opinion here, and everybody's got an opportunity here, but one man opinion would be have a special meeting where we can hopefully not that long a meeting, concentrate on the fees and call it a night.
Mr. Commissioner Steinberg, I agree. I think it's going to be one focus on that would probably be a full meeting's worth. So we should probably do that.
And Commissioner Steinberg, would you like to do that at the next regularly scheduled meeting or a special meeting?
No, I think a special meeting makes sense because we don't know what else we're going to have at the regular meeting. So it could hinder that getting done.
Mm-hmm.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I agree with that. I agree with everything Commissioner Steinberg just said.
I'm the first person to ever say that.
Hey, you can tell your wife.
Yeah, that seems prudent.
Are you okay with that, Jamie?
So does the commission want to schedule that special meeting now, or try and do it?
Well, we're all here, probably, yes.
Pick a date. I only request we don't do it on St. Patrick's Day.
You're here.
I'm busy.
Would you do it Thursday night?
If people want to do maybe March 24th.
That's a Thursday.
Yep. That'll make sense.
I'm away, but
that's halfway to the next meeting, so that's probably a good point.
I'll be away, but that's okay. If I don't, I'm probably not very helpful with the fees.
So, well, it'd be a remote meeting, so I'm just kidding. So just one more comment on that. Yeah, so okay, so March 24th, remote meeting, I'm assuming.
Yep.
7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Do we have at least 4 commissioners that date works for?
Yep.
That works, but I'll be coming from another meeting, so I might be 5 minutes late.
That
But
works
it's
for me.
remote. It's
Works for
remote,
me.
so I'll probably be okay.
Okay, so it sounds like we have at least 4 people that can attend. So, and we just really have those kind of 3 points to hash out. So we'll send out a reminder and an agenda as we approach that, and hopefully we'll get everything kind of wrapped up.
I was curious why the need to go back in person?
So there was an executive order that allowed for commissions only during COVID to help stop the spread. Then there was the state implementer bill allows for commissions to meet remotely through the end of April. So if that is extended, then the commission could choose to continue to meet remotely. If it's not extended, then there's nothing that allows for the commission to meet remotely rather than the in-person format that has been the typical order of business. So I will keep you posted if there's any extensions. I'm kind of not really expecting it based on the way that, things have been going and whatnot, but we'll certainly let you know. There might also be opportunities for commissioners to attend remotely in specific circumstances, I've heard, but I don't know that that's going to happen.
is Commissioner Bassford. My understanding is the feeling is that the public is able to participate a little easier in public forums as opposed to this kind of environment that we're in right now.
Really? I feel like that's the opposite.
Oh, I'm not saying they're right or wrong, but I think that was the feeling at the time.
Yeah, I think it varies depending on who you ask. And certainly I think there's certain circumstances where it's easier to meet remotely and share the information, and sometimes it is easier to be all in the same room. So we are
to have options.
To that point, if we are going to meet, two things. One, if we're to meet, we're meeting at the firehouse.
Yes, we have changed the meeting location to the firehouse to make it easier for BCTV to record, and it's also a larger room. So if we have, well, it's not really a larger room.
I guess the second part of that is, are they able to, with their technology, do screen sharing so that the public can see what we see now in a Zoom environment?
Hybrid.
I don't think hybrid meetings, there's nothing that allows hybrid meetings to continue. However, we have had meetings at the firehouse before, and there is a screen, and we have had applicants use PowerPoints so that everyone can see.
Yeah.
Just looking
and
at
it faces the audience.
Yes.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Commissioners have to turn around in their chairs. But.
Right. Okay.
Right. So we have full Wi-Fi there. So if we bring our laptops, we can look at the paper. Since we all said we didn't want the paper anymore, just want to make sure.
We'll probably ask you one more time as we move back to in-person meetings, what your preference is. But I believe that there's Wi-Fi.
There is.
I say hybrid's hard, but it could be not hard if they improve technology in a way that makes it possible. I should take that back from.
Again, I don't think it's something that legally the commission's allowed to do after April 30th unless something else comes up.
Yeah, I wasn't really talking about the hybrid as much as being able to share the information with the public on a screen that they can view. Because up until now, you know, we've had the applicant who has his charts and they face the commission, and the audience really can't see what's going on.
Yeah, I think that the public has benefited from the Dropbox as well, because the Dropbox is open to the public. In my experience, we've had a lot less people stop by and ask to look at site plans because they realize they're available on the website. So I think from a department standpoint, we're still going to attempt for a while at least to put everything in the Dropbox, especially since we have commissioners that are interested in digital copies instead of paper copies. So hopefully that will help with making information available to the public, and also perhaps reducing some of these paper files. And it looks like BCTV has their hand raised.
Their hand raised, yeah. Hello, BCTV. But my question is, can Jamie, you share, you know, site plans, for instance, on that screen or not?
Yeah, I mean, it could just be they throw together a PowerPoint with the different plan page.
Yeah, it plugs into your computer and it pops up on the screen in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. We have one other item, I guess, agent approvals, Jamie.
Yes, so 34 Howard Ave, residential addition. It's mostly a vertical addition. So going up, putting on dormers, modifying the roof. Part of the project, they are swapping out part of the deck for a terrace with an associated short retaining wall. The activity was probably around 60 feet away from a water course, so I did require an inland wetland permit. Activities in the same footprint as previous infrastructure, but given the retaining wall and ground disturbance, I wanted to just make sure that erosion controls are being installed properly and that there would be no impact to that water course from that activity.
Okay, we have. I guess that's it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
And a second.
Second.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
care.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everyone.
Have a good night.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.